So I started Girls for Change, which is a nonprofit that empowers girls to solve problems in their own communities. I started this organization on my kitchen counter, as many of you may have also done. And I quickly realized that I didn't want to work on my kitchen counter. I wanted to run this nonprofit the way the tech startups in Silicon Valley, where I started, were running their tech startups. And they were running them in places like this, in tech incubators. But that wasn't the norm for nonprofits at the time. This was 10 years ago. So I quickly moved this nonprofit that was empowering girls to create change in their communities. I talked my way into a tech incubator. And there were no other nonprofits in this tech incubator. But I said, look, I gotta be here. I need to learn from you guys. So they were like, all right, get in. So they let me in, and it was sort of like I was a human baby amongst a pack of wolves, right? Being raised by a pack of wolves, but I loved it. So I was sort of constantly peering over their desks, like, how are you doing it? How are you doing it? And I figured out how to raise money from VCs and corporations and to do things the way that they were doing it. So I ran this nonprofit the way tech companies were running their startups. And I figured out how to get hundreds of volunteers from corporations to help with this organization. And in the first year, things were fast and furious, and they were amazing, right? I raised my first $1 million. I had 1,000 girls. We were going gangbusters in Silicon Valley. And I should say it was fast and furious, and it was hard and kind of shitty also. So to tell this story, right, in retrospect, everything always sounds so great, but it was also hard and kind of shitty. But it was also great, right? I was getting the money, I had the girls, I had the volunteers, girls were changing things in their communities, it was amazing. So, like all good entrepreneurs, I thought, let's expand, right? So I thought, Silicon Valley is great, now let's go national and let's go global. So I had my scrappy little startup team and I said, let me get you guys spun up here in Silicon Valley and let's go to our next site. So we figured that Phoenix, Arizona was going to be our next site. It took us a while to figure it out, but we thought Phoenix, Arizona, that's where we're going. So I got my scrappy team. They were like, we'll be good without you for 2 weeks, Niko. You go do your thing. So I booked myself a ticket, got myself a motel room, right? I was not a tech startup, so I wasn't being paid a big salary. I didn't fly first class. I stayed in a motel room. And I got myself an office. I was very excited. It was a walk-in closet, but it could be used as an office in Phoenix, and I had 2 weeks there. So I got to Phoenix, I drove through the sweltering heat. If you've been to Phoenix in the summer, it is not a fun place. And I quickly got a business journal, and I ripped the page out of the 30 most influential CEOs in Arizona. And I thought, great, 2 weeks. I'm gonna call every single person on this list, I'm gonna meet with them. So I got to my little walk-in closet, and I opened my laptop and I started dialing for dollars, right? Really dialing for meetings. So I had a very slick little pitch and I knew I'd be leaving voicemails. And I did. I left voicemail after voicemail with my little pitch about how they were influencers and I was gonna meet with them and get on their radar and how we were changing the landscape of Arizona and getting girls at the decision-making table. And I talked to a few personal assistants, but otherwise, it was voicemail after voicemail. So I got to number 23 on the list, and the CEO of the biggest aerospace company in Arizona picked up his own damn phone. And I'm like, who the fuck picks up their own damn phone? Right? I was not expecting anyone to pick up their own phone. And this beautiful pitch that I put together, completely flew out my mind. And I was dumbstruck. And there I am, and he's like, hello? Right, here's my moment, right? I've got the guy on the phone, and I'm like, crap! So somehow I stumbled through the pitch, and I think I said something like, this is Niko Everett, and bringing Girls for Change to Arizona, and I want to get on your radar because I know you're a thought leader. So I don't know exactly what I said, because I basically blacked out during the whole conversation. But I remember exactly what he said to me. Verbatim, I will never forget it. So, and I quote, he said, I don't know who you are. I have no idea what you're doing. I don't know how you got my number. Please never call me again. And I remember I said something about getting on his radar, and he said, you will never get on my radar. And he hung up the phone. So that first year had gone super well, right? And it didn't mean like not everyone had said yes to me, but it was a lot of yeses. And that no, that level of rejection just like took it out of me. And it was early afternoon and I couldn't go through it the rest of the day. So I closed up my laptop, I left my little closet office, and I drove back to my motel room. And I don't know if you have ever had this experience, but you know, as an entrepreneur, right, like that morning, just a few hours earlier, this vision of going national and global had felt like audacious and risky and bold, and I was like, I was the bomb, right? And literally like 3 hours later, it was like pathetic. I felt pathetic, you know, from one freaking phone call. And that little office that I've been like, it's so cool, I have my own office, like seemed sad and desperate. In the motel room, like looked sad, and you know, that quickly. So I think this is something I think is especially unique to entrepreneurs, right? Because we generate our own momentum, and our mindset generates that momentum. And that rejection changed the way the whole thing looked to me. So I got back to my motel room, and I thought, how am I going to do the next 2 weeks here? Like, this is horrible. And I had the wherewithal to call one of my mentors, and I thought, let me at least just like get some empathy and some sympathy about how terrible this was. And I told her the story, and she said, great. And I was like, maybe I didn't totally hear that story right. Let me tell you one more time. That's the appropriate response. And she said, no, that was great. Because so far, you've been hearing a lot of yes. And if you're not hearing no, then you are not asking for enough. And that, for me, was the game-changing moment. So I got it, right? That what was happening for me, and I think for all of us, there's this sweet spot, right? Between yes, which we need when we start out, right? Like we need yeses because that's what builds our momentum. We need people to be like, great idea, sure, yeah, let me give you some money, let me help you out. Like we need that to get us going. And no, which I think is our edge, right? Like no is the edge. No is where we know we're like playing right, where things really come alive, but it's scary. And between the momentum and the yes and the no, which is the edge, I think is where like the real transformation happens, where the growth happens, where the replication and the scaling really happens. So that's where I think we really need to play. And that day I realized this is where I need to play. And I've been playing down here for 1.5 years, and I've raised $1 million, but I need to raise $10 million. So if I want this thing to be national and global, I'm gonna need to be playing way more up here. And if I have these kinds of conversations, I can't have them wipe my whole day out. I need to react differently to them, and I need to have my reaction to no be totally different. So I tell you that story because I want to bring you a challenge. And now, as I coach other entrepreneurs, this is a challenge I bring all the time to the table. So my challenge for you is for 30 days to think about every single day for 30 days asking for something for which you know the answer will be no. Why would you do something like that? The reason we play this game, and I play it all the time with my clients, with my friends, is because as we play that edge, we start to change the way we experience no. And when we change the way we experience no, asking for things becomes a totally different game. And we start to ask for more, and we start to get more for whatever it is that whatever game we're playing, right? So let me talk to you a little bit about how this actually works, because it sounds like, oh, that's kind of a fun game, Niko, but why would I really actually do this? So for most of us, and especially the females in the audience, but actually the research shows the majority of males also have this experience. The way we experience no is something like this, right? When someone says no to us, the physical process we have in our brains and in our body is that we have failed, right? There's some amount of failure. Even if it's momentary, we have this moment of, I have failed, right? Or I'm in some kind of danger, I want to run away, I am imperfect, right? It's not a positive experience. So that happens in our brain, but we actually also feel it physically in our body. So the job here is to start to neutralize this experience at the very least, right? The ideal is if someone said no to you and you were like, yeah, awesome, right? But at the very least, if someone said no to you and you were like, whatever, okay, cool, no biggie. But you weren't like, I gotta get out of here, I gotta run, I gotta flee, this is horrible. Like I need to close my laptop and leave and go home, right? Like pick up my toys and go home, thank you very much, I don't wanna play anymore, right? Because if we're not in the game, then how are we doing, okay? So, how do we actually do that, right? We can play the game, we can ask for something every day for 30 days, and we can still have the experience that when someone says no to us, we're like, no thanks, it's not really that much fun, I would like to leave. So, let me talk to you about how you actually do this. So, I wanted to figure this out for myself, and I did some actual research to what happens in our brain and in our body, and how we start to neutralize this experience. So, when you take the challenge on, if you decide to take this challenge on, there are 3 things that will help you in your brain and in your body start to change the process of what happens when you hear no. The first thing is to notice what happens. So for most of us when this happens, we start to just shut down. We sort of have the blank, right? So when someone says no to you, you don't like it, you kind of go blank. So the first thing is to actually notice what happens, trying not to judge it, but to see, do you have the experience of, I have failed in some way? Do you have the experience of like, this is awesome, I love this? If you are that person, you're welcome to go get yourself a cup of coffee, you're gonna go back to work, you probably don't need the rest of the stuff. For those of you who have some experience of, I am imperfect and I have failed in some way, just notice, okay? The second thing is to breathe. And people, when I talk about this, are often like, I'm always breathing, like, that's a really piece of advice there. But to notice that actually what happens when we go into a state of some sense of failure in any situation in our lives, our brain actually triggers us to, our breath comes way up here, right? And our breath starts to shorten. For most people, when they're gonna come on stage and they feel afraid, they start to breathe really shallow. And what happens is the synapses in our brain actually don't connect as well. So we cannot think as well, we can't process as well. So if we're in a negotiation, if we're sitting across from a VC or someone we want to join our team, and we feel like we might be failing, if we can start to breathe again, our best thinking comes back to us. And if we can't, if we're not breathing as well, and we're not bringing as much oxygen to our brain as we need, then we're literally not bringing our A game to the conversation because we're not connecting in our brain as well as we should be. So you're noticing what's going on in your body. You're starting to breathe and getting your best thinking back to the table. And then intend. That's what I wrote, right? Intend. So intend how you want to feel, right? So when you're in this conversation of no, how would you like to feel? So for me, the game I play is playful. I want to feel really playful when this happens, right? So if I'm like, my services are $5,000 an hour, and you say, no. I'm gonna be like, okay, great, let's play. So, what's next, right? Instead of what I normally feel is kind of like, really, am I good enough? Sure, are you sure, right? That's my intention, is to feel playful. So decide what you want to feel. Do you want to feel courageous? Do you want to feel brave? What's your intention for what you want to feel when someone says, I don't want your product. I will not invest in your company. No, you cannot have that. What's your intention? So those are your 3 things, right? You're gonna notice, you're gonna breathe, and you're gonna have an intention about how you wanna feel. So, we have enough time for you to actually do this. So I want you to think about the first week of asking for no, okay? 7 things. If you were to ask for something every day for 7 days, what would they be? So I'm gonna give you about a minute to write this down. Write it down. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of coaching on this. So I suggest that you ask for a number of things that don't actually matter, okay? But I want you to ask for one thing that does matter, one thing of consequence, okay? So get your pen out, get your paper, start writing. So here are some suggestions. These are things I like to ask for when I feel like I've started to get the danger, the failure of the no. I started to do this game myself. So some things I like to ask for are, for example, a free cup of coffee at the coffee shop. So you go in, you're like, hey, good morning. Can I have a latte, by the way? Can I have that for free? They're like, no. You're like, okay, cool. But you notice how it feels. You're like, I feel embarrassed. I feel like that's weird, right? I feel like I failed a little bit. Just notice, right? And then intend how you want to feel. Like, wouldn't it be funny if I felt like that was playful, or like I'm the mom, or whatever, okay? So write down 7 things. A free ride from your Lyft driver, right? You're going on vacation with your husband or wife, and you ask the hotel for a free night. Hey, I'm staying for 7. Can I get the 7th night for free? And they're just like, no. You're like, okay, I just thought I'd ask, right? And here's the fun part is that sometimes they're gonna say yes, which is awesome. You're like, really? Okay, awesome. Right, when we ask for things we think the answers are gonna be no to, sometimes people actually say yes, which is amazing, right? You're raising your game. So 7 things, I want you to write 7 things down, but I want one of them to be something you actually want. Okay, write down one thing you really want in the next 7 days that you're willing to ask someone for, but that you think the answer to is going to be no. So one thing of consequence. And when you're done with that, I want you to write down what you intend to feel. So how do you want to feel if someone says no to you? So let's say you're going to ask for some money. You're going to ask them to join your team, but you're not actually going to be able to pay them. And they say no. How do you want to feel when they say no to you? Write down how you intend to feel. Make sure you have one thing written down, because now we're going to play. So, I timed this just right. Even if I didn't, I'd ask one more time. And if he said no, we'd do it anyway. I'm going to get my one no in for the day. Okay, so I'm going to give you, we have to think about like 4 or 5 minutes left. So you're going to turn to the person next to you. Make sure everyone has someone. And here's how this is going to go. You're going to ask for the one thing of consequence, the one thing you really want, okay, this week. It doesn't have to be a big thing, just the one thing you'd really like, but that you think that whomever you're going to ask is going to tell you no, okay, and you're going to practice. So you're going to say to your partner, my services are now $5,000. I wanted to let you know your partner is your pretend client. I wanted to let you know you're going to get the invoice next week. Let me know if you have any questions about that. And your partner is going to say no. She's going to say, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for me, okay? And all you're going to do is notice how you feel, take a deep breath, and intend the other way that you want to feel, okay? And then you're going to switch. I just want you to have the experience of asking and having someone tell you no for the thing that you really want. And then switch and make sure you get to go the other way, okay? Are you ready for this?
For clarification, we're choosing the one...
Hang on 1 sec. Mike has a question about clarification, so hold tight. Yes, clarification.
So we're asking our specific question. You just gave an example of what you would...
That's what I want. That's made up. That's not what I want. But so you're asking for the one thing that you want, one thing this week that you would like that is something that you really care about. Okay? So ask your partner for one thing that you want. Your partner is not the person who's going to necessarily give it to you, and they're going to tell you no, whether they want to give it to you or not. Okay? So go ahead. You have about 3 minutes. I'm going to make sure that everybody switches. So begin. All right. I couldn't even write this. I didn't know we could talk make sure you haven't already switched, that you're switching, and both people get to go.
I'll get the SpaceX somewhere. First time, I asked for something. He asked to go to Spain for $100. And the guy says, no, it's okay. The third time he asked
Alright, come on back. Bring it back. Right up here. Stop asking for things you want. Alright, so here's the deal. You guys are impossible to bring back together. It's like, once I got you asking, you'll never stop asking. How do I get these people back together? Okay, so thanks for playing. So, the last thing I want to tell you is the reason that I do this work, the reason that I do these talks is because to me, what really turns me on.
Yeah, can we get a woo? The silence.
Is playing on that edge, right? Is asking for more than I think I'm gonna get. And not just because it's actually what makes me more successful and makes my clients more successful, that's fun. But what's really fun to me is that at that edge is where I know we feel most alive and most awake. And I think, especially for me as I get older, there's less and less ways to feel woken up. And so for me, asking for what I really want, asking for things I'm not sure I'm gonna get, is what keeps me feeling really on the edge. So I invite you to take this on as a real challenge. One, because it will actually get you more of what you want. And two, because it will have you feel really woken up. So, thank you.
Niko, thank you so much. That was amazing. Another warm applause for Niko. I'm totally gonna back up that idea, by the way. Who's single in the audience? Who's single? Don't worry, I'm not gonna ask you out or anything. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. You guys are on the market? Yeah? Guys, raise your hand. Who's single on the market? You should totally do this. Regardless of how the date is going at the end of the night, you should just say, we should kiss. See what happens. Even if you get rejected, I'm telling you, it sounds funny, and it kind of is in ways. But if you get used to being told no right then and there, and you can walk away like, cool, maybe some other time, maybe some other girl, then it's very empowering. And if she says yes, well then you just go in. Isn't that nice?
I would add maybe.
But if she says no, the conversation.
The answer is no!
If the answer is no, then that's when you practice your intention of being like the cool guy that walks away. Yeah, anyway. And lick your wounds later, in private. Yeah, anyway, but I do believe in the power of rejection, because what's the saying? When you're dealing with no's, they actually help you change direction. Like if you're building a company and everyone just says yes, 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 it's just full steam ahead. The no's will actually help guide you into a better product for your business or a better mindset for yourself. So kudos to that. give it a try. Anyway, we're going to open up to Q&A now. If you have questions, raise your hand. John, walk around with the mic. If whatever it is that's coming out of your mouth does not end with a question mark, we will yank the microphone away from you with great pleasure, because that's how we roll. Anyway, and if you guys want to share stories later, Niko, will you be hanging out with us a little bit after?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So story time later, questions now. Thanks.
Start this side.
Yeah. Hey, so we talked a lot about interpersonal when you're directly across, but so much is on the internet now where you're sending in an application and then you don't hear back for a few days. So does your advice change for dealing with the screen?
So I'm a huge proponent of figuring out a way around the internet. So I would say I would never send in an application and expect to get a yes from that. I just think it doesn't work. And there's always a way to find another way to talk to that person, right? So use LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is like magical, and you can and network. So yes, always go for a no, and don't you dare wait around to hear back from that application or from something you're like throwing in the internet, because I'm telling you the answer will be no. So it's too passive. Yeah. Happy to talk offline about lots of ways to do that, but I think these days, that just is not the way it is happening. Yeah.
Over here, next question.
Yeah.
Hi, so with this journey, how has your pitch changed over time, and like maybe more tactfully, like if you were to speak to that aerospace CEO today and give him that same pitch, like what changed?
Yeah. So I did try to go back to him, I will say, once I like put my big girl panties back on. And I think now I would go back to him a few more times. So now I feel less concerned about hurting people's feelings or looking bad than I did back then. So now I feel a lot like you can take care of yourself and I'll take care of myself. Of course, there's a line of being obnoxious, but in an appropriate way. I used to really worry about people feeling, of looking bad, of like having someone say no to me too many times. And I think now, because that was a number of years ago, now I would go back a few times and say, I think this is in your best interest actually to hear more about this. And in fact, the way you treated me as a woman, I think is exactly why you need to be engaging all the women at your company to help girls solve problems in their community, because you should never tell someone they're not going to be on your radar. Right? Like that's disempowering, and we want to empower girls, right? I just find a way to work my way back in with more confidence than I think I had then, because it was just so early days, So, yeah. So I think, one great idea is, if you're early days, is to find a mentor who can sort of show you the confidence you don't have and maybe help you have a pitch that has more confidence than you even have right now. It's hard to have that if you're early days, Yeah.
Okay, good.
I thought this exercise was excellent. It was very eye-opening, and I tested it with a question. I'm actually going to be asking somebody for seed funding, and it's somebody who should be providing it because it's someone I have a 20-year history with. But I noticed in myself, when I was asking my partner the question, I had an expectation of no. And I'm curious how much that impacts the outcome. How much does it affect you when you're walking in expecting no as opposed to when you're walking in expecting yes?
Yeah, great question. So 2 things I would say about that. One, I think it's a really powerful exercise to envision the yes. Absolutely. So if it's something of consequence, for sure, I think that you should have a visualization and already have seen it going yes. Absolutely. And I think if you actually get good at neutralizing no, then no is actually not no, right? It's the beginning of a conversation. So if someone says no to you, you're like, great. So, and I would say get really clear what your intention is when someone says no to you, right? So my intention is playfulness. That means that's the beginning of what we get to play, right? So someone says no, and I'm like, great. All right, so let's talk, right? So that doesn't mean no to me at all. That means it's the beginning of a conversation. So I would say first, visualize it being a yes. Eventually, right? It may not be a yes right away, and make your intention something that feels fun. Something that feels like we can keep having this conversation, and no, it doesn't mean that it's never going to happen, right? That's ridiculous, right? So that it feels like it's more fun and less scary and overwhelming. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Hey Niko, I'm Amy Winslow, and I host a live call-in show called the Product Business Show. We've got about 800 people on it. I would love to have you come speak. Would you like to do that?
No, just kidding.
Exactly what I'm saying, and the invitation is sincere. I think it'd be amazing, and I think it'd be a really good fit.
I'd love to talk to you about it.
Perfect.
Yes, I won't make you practice dealing with the no. I promise. I'll let someone else do that.
I was actually practicing it and tapping on the.
Good for you. Yes. Awesome. Good job, Amy. Good job. Yes.
So, thank you. This is really exciting. I can't wait to say no to my husband.
That was not what I suggested.
Oh my God, she walked away
And some of Sheryl Sandberg's work around, the bossy girl on the playground versus the girl with leadership skills. How do we reframe our relationship with women and their ability to ask for what they want in a way that's not cute, right? And I think that has to start really early. So how do you, and obviously you have a lot of experience in that. So how do we start to think about that? And then with what's happening with kind of the movement around women, how do we ask for what we want? Because I see a lot of these political and other initiatives where there's no ask at the end, right? You get excited and there's no ask. How do we translate that power across men and women to action?
Yeah. So one thing that I thought was really useful that I learned was the reason why for more women than men this tends to be harder. And again, when I did the research, because I was beginning to be asked to talk about this more with men and women, so I wanted to understand, is this true for men also? And it is true for the majority of men, but more so for women. And the reason this is harder for women is because the way that we're brought up and the way that we develop is that girls' social and emotional skills develop earlier than boys. So when we're in bigger classrooms in school, girls learn early that the way that they get accolades is by standing in line and following directions and asking permission and being good girls. And the teachers say, good job, you're doing a great job by standing in line. Boys are just not good at it yet. They literally don't have the physical and emotional ability to stand in line and follow the rules. So they get good at falling out of favor. Right? The teachers constantly say, get in line, you did bad, right? Way more frequently. And so it's not a big deal, right? So when you learn very early that having someone say no or tell you that you did a bad job at something isn't that big of a deal, you learn it early. And so that's why just in general, it tends to be harder for girls to do this because we learn to be good means to ask permission, to follow the rules, to stand in line, right? So we're just retraining our brains around that. And if you happen to be a gentleman and you know that your childhood was maybe more about following directions or following rules, it'll be harder for you to do this. So we're just retraining ourselves, right? And for those of you who knew you were bigger risk takers, you were more audacious as a kid, then it'll be easier for you. And you're like, that's fine, right? So just so you know what's happening in your brain and your body, that's the retraining that you're doing. And that's why for women it's harder. For most women it's harder. So that answers your first question. The second question, I think for all of us, remember for there to be an ask, right? That's the biggest thing, I think, for everybody. It happens all the time. I hear it all the time with my coaching clients when we're practicing for them to go do their ask. They'll say all the reasons why their company and their idea is phenomenal, and there's no ask. I'm like, and, right? So, I would just have somebody actually be your coach, one of your coworkers, and make sure every single time that they check to see, is there an ask, and is it a strong ask, and is it a clear ask? And is it what you really mean to be asking for? I think it's that simple. Yeah.
Niko, one last question over here.
Yeah.
A lot of the time when you're communicating with people these days, it's either through LinkedIn or email, where people have the option to not say no, but just to ignore it altogether. Yeah. How would you say you deal with that?
Yeah.
You put an ad on it.
Yeah. So I still think you can be very clear by email and using social media, using email, being online. I think you can be just as clear that way, and you can ask for something very specific. And I still ask people for in-person time. So I Zoom all the time. I like to do that even more than phone. So if it's something important, I build rapport, right, on LinkedIn, over email, but I would never do an ask that way. So my ask is, let's have time together. And if possible, let's Zoom, right? So let's be in person, let's see eye to eye. Certainly let's meet in person if we can, but so frequently, they're on a different coast or something. So I actually wouldn't make an ask that's really of consequence there, except let's have some time together. And save it there because people have a much harder time saying no to you, right, when you're eye to eye. So don't waste your ask, when it's so easy for someone to be like, nah, sorry, I don't have time for that. Yeah. Awesome, thank you guys, that was fun. I'll stick around for a little bit.